Hello there, today my presentation is about the world of life and another I'm going to talk about the classification of organisms. Scientists classified living things in order to organize and make sense of the incredible diversity of life. The science of classifying living things is called taxonomy. Now we're going to talk about the significance of classification of organisms. First one, easy to study about organisms. Ability to get an idea about the whole biosphere by studying a few selected organisms without studying each and every organism. An ability to reveal the relationship between different groups of organisms. An identification of organisms with economical uses to humans. Methods of classification of organisms. Aristotle in 4th BC introduced the first scientific classification of organisms, and then in 18th AD, Carlos Linnaeus introduced a successful classification, and according to that, all organisms on Earth, including human, is classified into two methods as artificial classification and natural classification. So, in artificial classification, features such as presence or absence of locomotive appendages and habits are considered. The advantage of artificial classification is that such schemes are easy to develop and relatively stable to change. Then the disadvantage is that they don't generally show evolutionary relationship is the most important point, but in artificial classification it's not showed. And for example, if organisms were classified according to the presence of fins, then whales would be grouped fish. If organisms were classified based on the presence of shells, then snails would be grouped with turtles and not with squid, like that. But in natural classification, it depicts the evolution relationship among living organisms and morphological, physiological, cytological, and molecular biological features are considered in natural classification. And it explains the natural relationship among organisms of the same species and the evolutionary relationships among different organisms. As examples, we consider locomotive appendages, fins of fish, feathers of birds, legs of human can be discussed under the same group. So it's said that the most appropriate system to classify organisms is the natural classification. So we can talk about the three-domain system of classification. In 1969, Robert Whittaker introduced five-kingdom classification of system. But after that, in 1990, Carl Lewis introduced the modern classification system, and according to that, there are three parts as domain archaea, domain bacteria, and domain eukarya. So we'll first talk about the domain archaea. Archaea constitute a domain of single-celled organisms, and these organisms lack cell nuclei, and therefore they are called prokaryotes. Archaea were initially classified as bacteria, receiving the name Archaebacteria, like Archaebacteria kingdom, but this term has fallen out of use. Archaea cells have unique properties separating them from the other two domains, bacteria and eukarya. They have the ability to live in extreme environmental conditions like volcanoes, deserts, hot springs, ocean beds, high saline environments, and polar ice caps like extremophiles. And they are not sensitive to most antibiotics, and if they cannot be destroyed with antibiotics. Then we can talk about the domain bacteria. The organisms belong to this group are also prokaryotes without nucleus, and they are sensitive to antibiotics and sometimes pathogenic. Again, and can be found everywhere in the environment. They are the most abundant group of organisms, and here we can see the bacteria and the cyanobacteria. Now we're going to talk about the harmful and useful effects of bacteria to human. Food spoilage cause diseases to human as well as to other organisms. They are harmful, and useful effects are they produce curd, yogurt, and cheese, and uh, dairy products, and fix atmospheric nitrogen to increase soil nitrate level, decompose dead bodies like that. And then we can talk about the next domain eukarya. The most prominent group organisms with a eukaryotic cellular organization belong to this domain. They have the ability to live in different environments. They are not sensitive to antibiotics, and there are four kingdoms belong to this domain as kingdom Protista, kingdom Plantae, kingdom Fungi, and kingdom Animalia. So we'll first talk about the kingdom Plantae. Kingdom Plantae includes all the plants. They are eukaryotic, multicellular, and autotrophic organisms. The plant cell contains a rigid cell wall. Plants have chloroplasts and chlorophyll pigments, which is required for photosynthesis, and these are the characteristic features of plant kingdom. They are autotrophies as they make their own food, and they reproduce asexually by vegetative propagation or sexually. And these are multicellular eukaryotes. The plant cell contains the outer cell wall and a large central vacuole. Plants contain photosynthetic pigments called chlorophyll present in the plastids. The plants in the kingdom Plantae can be divided into two groups as non-flowering plants and flowering plants. So non-flowering plants, plants that cannot produce flowers are known as non-flowering plants. And these non-flowering plants can be again divided into two groups as non-flowering seedless plants and non-flowering seed plants. Non-flowering seedless plants are the plants that do not produce flowers, as example Salvinia, Rhinaria, and Poinacer. Non-flowering seed plants, the seeds of these plants are not covered by fruit and they are naked, so they are called as gymnosperms, like Cycas, Venus, like that. And flowering plants, plants that produce flowers are known as non-flowering plants. The seeds that are produced by flowers are covered by fruit, so they are called angiosperms. These plants are well adapted to live on land and life on land and show various adaptations to conserve water, and they can be divided into two groups according to the number of cotyledons in the seed, as monocotyledonous plants and dicotyledonous plants. In monocotyledonous plants, a single cotyledon in the seed and the stem is branched, no taproot, leaves possess parallel venation, no secondary growth. The diameter of the stem is even, as example, we can get coconut, and we can see these features in this coconut plant with parallel venation. And dicotyledonous in the two cotyledons in the seed, stem is unbranched, root system with a taproot and lateral roots. Leaves possess a reticular venation. Secondary growth takes place. The base of the stem is broad and tip is thin. As example, you can get mango. Kingdom Animalia, it's a kingdom with animals who are multicellular, and there are about 1,260,000 species in this group. They are unable to produce their own food. They are heterotrophic. Animals belonging to kingdom Animalia again can be divided into two groups according to the presence or absence of a vertebral column as invertebrates and vertebrates. So we'll first talk about the invertebrates. Organisms without a vertebral column is known as invertebrates. Invertebrates again can be divided into different phyla according to their features, and the five main phyla are Cnidaria, Annelida, Mollusca, Arthropoda, and Echinodermata. Cnidaria, diploblastic organisms like Hydra, sea anemone, and jellyfish belong to this phylum, and the features of Cnidaria are all are aquatic animals in marine, few of them are freshwater dwellers, and a multicellular body built up of two germinal layers, therefore known as diploblastic. A cavity present within the body called the sealant ring acts as the digestive tract. There are two forms of medusa and polyp. Medusa can move with a while polyp attached to the surface and they can move. And they have a radial symmetry. All are predators attack small organisms to paralyze them using nematode seed. And then Annelida, the first organisms to evolve a body cavity called coelom, belong to this phylum. Segmented worms like earthworm legionaries are examples of annelids, and features of annelids are live in damp soil, marine water habitats, multicellular body made of three germinal layers, therefore known as triple plastic, possesses a slender, worm-like body, and body is divided into segments internally and externally, so therefore they are known as segmented worms, and the body shows a palatal symmetry. There is a fluid-filled cavity between body wall and digestive tract, and it's known as the phylum. It provides an independent movement for the gut wall of the body movements. Some produce asexually and some by sexual reproduction. Then Mollusca, soft-bodied triple-elastic organisms belong to this phylum. Species such as snails, bivalve, chitin, stug, squid, and the octopus belong to this phylum. They live in terrestrial, freshwater, and marine habitats, and they are multicellular, triple-plastic, and soft-bodied animals. The body is divided into head, muscular foot like this, and viscous mass. The body is not divided into segments like in worms. The body is moistened by mucus. Possess a bilateral symmetrical body, show sexual reproduction. Most of them are unisexual. Then Arthropoda. This is the phylum with the highest number of species in the animal kingdom. 75% of the animal species belong to this phylum, and the class Insecta of this phylum. Arthropoda possess the highest number of organisms, and there are about 950,000 species belong to this phylum. The organisms with jointed limbs, such as bee, cockroach, butterfly, cricket, mosquito, like that, they belong to this phylum, mostly insects. And they live in marine, freshwater, and terrestrial habitats. Body is segmented in several segments. Collectively from functional segments are called tagma. Some possess special wings, carry out sexual reproduction. Then Echinodermata is a phylum that show phylogenetic, it means evolutionary relationship to phylum Chordata. Starfish, paddlefish, and sea urchin, sea cucumber, sea lily belong to this phylum. And these are examples. The starfish and the features of Echinodermata are all are marine. And triple plastic and coelomic body is separated into 5 radial arms and possess a sharp spiny body covering and body is star-shaped, cylindrical, or flower-like. A high distributed water and vascular system present in the body. Heart, brain, and eyes are absent and carry out sexual reproduction. Then vertebrates, an organism with a vertebral column is referred to as a vertebrate. So they also can be classified into 5 groups considering their structural features as Pisces, Amphibia, Reptilia, Aves, and Mammalia. So first up, Pisces. Fish that are well adapted to live in water belong to this group. They live in fresh water and marine environments. Some have cartilaginous skeleton, some have bony skeleton. So they possess a bony or cartilage in the skeleton. Body is streamlined shaped to swim in water like using fish. Body is covered by scales. Possess fins for swimming and balancing. Possess a lateral loin system to detect vibrations in water. Two-chambered heart, single atrium, and ventricle. Uh, Respiration is done by gills, cold-blooded animals, and eyes without eyelids. Then amphibians which need water to complete their life cycle belong to this class. They are the first organisms to invade land during evolution. As examples, you can get frogs, toads, salamander, and they've spent a part of their life in water. The features of amphibians are what is essential to complete their life cycle and possess metamorphosis, possess a thin mucous skin with glands, no scales on glands and skin, and pentadactyl limbs are used for locomotion, possess a three-chambered heart with 2 atria and a single ventricle. Respiration is done by lungs, more skin, and buccal cavity. They are cold-blooded animals. In reptilia, animals that are well adapted to life on land belong to this class. They live in terrestrial, freshwater, and marine ecosystems. As example, you can get tortoise, turtle, snake, lizards, monitor, iguana, and crocodile. And features: dry skin without glands, possess scales on skin, presence of pentadactyl limbs for locomotion, heart with two atria and incompletely divided ventricle. Respiration is done by lungs. Cold-blooded animals possess internal fertilization. In Aves, birds that have adapted for flying belong to this class. The largest bird, ostrich, and the smallest bird, hummingbird, jungle fowl, blue monkey, kiwi, duck, swan, are some examples of birds. And these are the features. Possess a light, bony endoskeleton, possess a streamlined body for flying like fish. Skin is covered by feathers, scales are restricted on the legs. No teeth, a beak that is adapted to different modes of nutrition is present. They have eyes with eyelids, sharp side, presence of pentadactyl limbs for locomotion. The limbs are converted into wings and first time with heart with two atria and two ventricles. Warm-blooded animals' body temperature is not changed according to the environmental temperature. And the last group, Mammalia, animals that nourish young with milk belong to this class Mammalia, and human mice nourish monkey, orangutan, gorilla, dolphin are some examples belong to this group. And here are the features listed up. Skin is covered by hairs. Hair present inside hair follicles and possess mammary glands, sweet glands, and sebaceous glands. Possess earlobes, four-chambered heart with two atria and two ventricles, complete double circulation. Biconcave red blood cells lacking a nucleus. They are warm-blooded animals. Testes present outside the body. Internal fertilization and possess a placenta and embryonic membranes. So, nomenclature of organisms. A successful nomenclature was introduced by a Swedish natural scientist called Carlos Linnaeus in 1753. As it contains two epithets for an organism, it is known as binomial nomenclature. The methodology to name an organism is regulated by International Commission on Botanical Nomenclature (ICBN) and International Commission on Zoology Nomenclature (ICZN). And these are the standards of binomial nomenclature and the method. The scientific name of a species or species name is comprised of two epithets. The first epithet is generic name and the second epithet is the specific epithet. The species name is given in Latin or Greek. The first letter of generic epithet is capital and the other letters are simple. When handwriting, it should be underlined, and when printed, it should be italicized. That's all for today. Thank you.